Okay, we're going to get started now with making changes in the new year. Thank you very much for joining me. My name is Edward Pio, and I hope you will enjoy the next hour or so of this information. And I'd like to start with my personal opinion on making change, and that is we don't intend to make change. We think about it. For example, we look at ourselves in the mirror and we say, "Oh, I'd like to lose weight here and like to lose weight there." And we think about maybe I should go on a diet, or we're smoking and we think, well, it's a new year and it's a new time. Maybe I ought to change and stop smoking, or whatever it happens to be, drinking too much at parties and so forth. The problem with that whole thing is that we don't intend to do it. We're thinking about it would be the best way to put it at the moment. And because our mind is thinking always and going in many directions, what happens is we think about it as we look in the mirror, and the minute we walk away from the mirror, we no longer are thinking about losing weight. Or when we start to cook, or when we sit down to eat. I want to sort of remind you that the way our brain works is this. If I'm sitting on a chair and I think about getting up, nothing happens until I intend to get up. When I intend to get up, now at this second, at this moment, the brain now gives the automatic information on balance and on what I need to do muscle wise in order to get up off the chair. The important part of that, and it's something that most human beings don't understand, the important part of that is we can think about getting up off the chair. I do many times, particularly in the evening after I turn the TV off and getting ready to go to bed, and I want to be quiet for a little while before I go in and get ready to go to bed. And I sit there and I think about, I'm going to get off the chair. But the fact of the matter is, nothing happens until I actually say to myself or intend to get up off the chair. At that moment, I get up off the chair automatically. I don't have to think about moving forward, moving in any direction to do that. I simply get up off the chair automatically. And the matter of the fact, our recordings in our brain, if you will, how to walk, we don't think about how to walk, how to put one foot in front of the other. It's all automatic. And there's some psychologists out there who think that 90+% of most people's lives is on automatic, which simply means that they are not thinking about changing whatever is going on. They're really not. They're sort of going about their life on automatic. And so I'm going to dip into that considerably during this particular webinar. So let's start with many years ago, thousands of years ago, human beings have been here. And you don't have to go back too many years, maybe 400 or 500 years, where most people around the world, if they didn't like something in their life or if they wanted something in their life, they would pray to gods. They would sacrifice a lamb. They would go to church. They would do whatever they're going to do with the intention of looking to the source for solving their particular problem. And then a few years ago, that's the thousands of years human beings have been doing that. If they want to change something, they pray to God to do that, or and gods in various parts of the world. Gods are all different. And in India, for example, there are many gods. But in the Christian world, where I am, for example, in that Christian world, we have many saints. We have many spirits who can help us. So it's not unusual. But what is unusual is a human being today understanding that we create what it is that we are experiencing. Listen to that very carefully. We create what it is we are experiencing. We have created it. We have thought about it. We have intended to have that. And thus, somewhere down the road, we have it. Now, it's really, really important to note that it wasn't until 1939, there were some other authors previous to that that projected this idea, but a plastic surgeon by the name of Maxwell Maltz wrote a book called Psycho-Cybernetics. And in that book, which has been copied, the ideas of it have been copied time and time and time again. But within that, he basically said, here is the blueprint for creating your life. If we want this, this is what we need to do in order to get this. He didn't say we create. I don't think there's anything in that book that says essentially we're creating it. But what he did say in that book, and which has been copied time and time again, thousands of books, movies, The Secret, for example, all of these things come back to one idea, which is we control what is going on in our life. And one of the best examples that many people know about from psycho-cybernetics, or goal setting, if you will, is the idea of creating a parking place. Many people, even my friends today, who don't necessarily think in terms of creating, do create a parking place. And so I tell them, and if you're one of those out there who are used to thinking, oh, I would like to have a parking place close to the bank that I'm going to, or the store that I'm going to be in, it's not a matter of a parking place like in a shopping center. It's downtown Monterey or downtown Pacific Grove or downtown wherever you live. You can create a parking place. There's no question about it. But there's some responsibility, and I'm just going to bring this out to you. There's some responsibility when you create a parking place. For example, if someone was parked there and maybe left because you are creating a need for a space in that area, left 30 seconds earlier, got out on the freeway 30 seconds earlier than what they planned to, and somehow were involved in an accident as a result of that. I don't know for sure, but I would think that there's some possibility that you would have a hand in creating that. So one of the things that we get into philosophically when we start talking about creating stuff in our life, whether it's creating good things that we'd like to have, or getting rid of those things that we're not happy with, habits that we're not happy with, addictions that we're not happy with, the process is basically the same. The first thing we need to do is to create an intention, because there is a thing called a goal-seeking mechanism in our brains, somewhere in our brain. I don't know where it is exactly, but that goal-seeking, once we put a goal into, in other words, an intention into that mechanism, we are essentially led to that or creating that automatically. We don't have to think about it again. So if I really wanted to create something right now, I would have to have a desire to change something that is going on in my life, like an addiction or a habit, or a desire to put something new into my life. For example, in the 1970s, while I was teaching goal setting as a part of my classes, for example, I wasn't really doing it. I was doing what everybody else was doing, which was we're talking about it, but I never quite got around to doing it. So this particular day, I had about a 40-minute commute. So I decided that, number one, I needed a new car, because the car that I was driving was 3 or 4 years old and it was starting to have problems. And so I decided one day in my commute that I would get a a piece of paper or a pamphlet of some sort. I don't remember exactly what I did, but I started writing down the qualities of the car that I would like to have, following my own teaching, following cybernetics, following the idea of how to place goals into the goal-seeking mechanism, and then allowing those goals to come into my reality. Whether I attracted them, whether I created them, whether they just accidentally were put there by the gods, I really didn't care. What I was going to do was to see if what I was teaching would in fact work for something as major as creating a new car. So the interesting thing is I started writing down the qualities. This is like in 1974, 1975, and I think there was a gas shortage. So the first thing that I did was must have high gas mileage. And then I had eventually 8 different major categories that I developed over a period of about maybe a month of commuting. During this 40-minute commute, both directions, I would open the little booklet that I was writing in, and I would cross out some things that I had written there maybe in the morning or in the afternoon of the day before on my way home, and I would add something new. And I eventually came to 8 particular points that I wanted in my new car. The first one, probably the most important, is to get the best mileage possible. Then I had the details down to I wanted a 4-door sedan. I wanted it a light color. I wanted seat covers that weren't going to get worn. I don't remember all of the things, but there were 8 particular things. So on this one, I was incidentally, I live in Central California. So I take the San Jose Mercury newspaper every day. And one day I was going to San Jose, actually to Santa Clara, to visit a student who was in the hospital in Santa Clara. And I came to the intersection just before the parking lot, I think of the Kaiser Hospital, if I remember correctly. And I looked up out of my corner of my eye, I saw this car up really high rotating. A car rotating. And this was at Stites Buick Volvo, I think was it. Anyhow, it was a Volvo car, which I'd never heard of ever before, as a matter of fact. And I didn't pay much attention to it, other than the fact that I had noticed it, went about my business. The next morning, I picked up the San Jose Mercury, and because of the fact that I had noticed that that was Stites Buick, I think Volvo, I saw an ad in the San Jose Mercury just the next morning that literally was trying to sell new Volvos. Volvo. I'm not sure that I'm pronouncing that clearly. Volvo, a Swedish car. I never heard of the Volvo before. And the 8 things that were listed in this ad were almost exactly word for word what I had come to in my own writing of my goals and what I wanted in a car. So the first thing I did when I came to my office in Monterey was to look in the phone book. Remember, we didn't have internet back then. Look in the phone book, and I found a dealer in Seaside that was selling Volvo cars. So that afternoon, I went to, because there's something driving inside me at that point, I went there, and the salesman started trying to sell me this and that. And I said, wait a minute, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And he says, well, we don't have anything like that. But he says, you could put a deposit down and we could order it. And I said, well, how long would it take to get the car? And he said, maybe 6 months, maybe 8 months. And I said, I'm really not interested in doing that. But I do know that I'm going to eventually have a Volvo. I've never even seen one other than the one that was on the rotating platform. So could you show me one? He said, yeah, I have a used one, a year old or 2 years old. And I said, well, could I drive it? And he said, yes. And it happened to be a diesel, which is one of the things that I ended up getting in this car, a diesel, which would, back in those days, not too many service stations were offering diesel, but diesel was getting the highest mileage at the time. So anyhow, I went and I drove the car around 2 or 3 blocks, brought it back into the thing. And he said, well, do you want to put a deposit down? I said, no, but I'm going to leave you my name. And I want you to call me when you get my car in. I was unbelievably positive about my car was going to be there. There wasn't a question in my mind. And when he's telling me that it's going to be 6 to 8 months before the car gets there from Sweden or wherever it was being built, I just didn't accept that. I just said, here's my phone number, give me a call. The next morning, he calls me and he says, not 2 days later or not a week later, the next morning he called me and he said, Mr. Pio, I don't believe it and I have no idea why, but your car just came in on a car carrier and there's no other order for it. I said, does it match everything that I told you that I wanted? He said, down to the T. Every single thing was exactly what I wanted. I said, please don't do anything until I get there. And so I drove immediately from my office to the seaside and I looked at it. They just had it off. They hadn't serviced it or anything else. And I said, let's work out a deal. And I leased it, as a matter of fact, on a 3-year lease, if I remember correctly, and drove it off the next morning, actually, because they had to service it. That to me, and I've had many creations in my life, but that was one that should have said to me, Ed, anything you want or don't want, all you have to do is get clear as to what it is that you want, and you will eventually get it. That's what goal setting is about. And whether you call it creation or whether you call it laws of attraction, which another terminology out there besides goal setting is that somehow we can attract something into our life. And I think that's because most of us do not want to admit out loud that we can actually, out of the air molecules, if you will, create a physical thing. But what I'm here to tell you today, and I'm going to give you some ideas of how it can be done, what I'm here to tell you today, and it's very important you understand that we are creators. The major difference probably between us and all other animals in the animal species, the major difference, and plant species for that matter, is that human beings are able to create. How they're able to create, how they attract, how it is, certainly is a mystery. Metaphysically speaking, quantum physically speaking, we can get into that, and hopefully before the end of this webinar, you'll have a better understanding of this. But the fact is, if you want to make a change in your life, thinking about it is not sufficient. Even telling your mate or telling your neighbors or telling your family, I'm going to do this, is not going to do it. There's only one person who can do that, and that's you. And it's kind of like getting off the chair. If you don't really get clear as to what it is that you're going to do, and then intend to do it, nothing's going to happen. People can intend, and in my own life, I can tell you that, I can intend to get rid of my belly. But what do I do about it? Do I really intend to do it? I can think about it. I can look in the mirror. I can say to myself, that my shirt would fit better if I lost a little bit of my tummy. But do I really intend to do that? When I go to eat, and am I ordering, if I go to a restaurant, something on the basis that's going to help my belly? Probably not. What I do is order what I want at the moment without consideration. So what do I do about that? Well, several months ago, I decided that I was going to do something about reducing my belly. And by the way, for those of you who don't know me, I'm 87 years old, going to be 88 years old. I'm perfectly healthy. I don't get flu shots. I don't get sick. I haven't been sick for probably 75 years. I just don't, and I'm not bragging to you. I'm simply telling you that I value this mechanism of my body to the point that I take care of it enough to my immune system is able to handle anything. I don't care what the flu bug is or whatever it is. So I don't want to get too off the track, but I finally decided I'm going to follow my own teachings and change the size of my belly. And then I developed that intention. And gradually I noticed, and this is really a kind of amazing, I noticed that I desired less carbohydrates. I desired, one of the things that I really love sometimes is making spaghetti, because I live by myself, is making spaghetti, which is, you have to admit, it's kind of fattening. One of the things I don't worry about is eating bread. Very seldom do I eat bread unless it's garlic bread. But I noticed a change inside. And within probably 2 or 3 weeks, I noticed that my pants were getting a little bit easier to button. Within about a month and a half, I noticed a major shift. And I wasn't doing anything on purpose. What I'm telling you is I wasn't counting calories and I wasn't doing this and that. I was eating what I think was what I wanted to eat. Because one of the things that I teach in my classes, and it's really important, that you do, if you sort of talk to yourself and ask yourself before each meal, what do I want? What do I desire? What feels best for me for lunch? By the way, I'm not proposing this to you, but one of the things I don't do is I don't eat breakfast and never have for years and years and years. All I have is coffee, a couple of glasses or a couple of cups of coffee, and that's it. But I do ask myself every single lunchtime for years, what do I want? And I sort of wait to hear my body or somewhere the message, do I want soup? Do I want a salad? Do I want to go to Carl's Jr. for a burger? What do I want? And I get an answer and I go ahead and do it. And one of the things that's nice about that is my body accepts whatever I put in it, because I've asked essentially permission to do it, which is really kind of nice. But also I'm doing something that I want to do for me. And the biggest problem, which we'll get into a little bit later here, with all of us have, is we can do something for other people very easily. If we're a mother, we can do always for our children. Whatever the circumstances are, we can do, and we'll find a way to do it for our children. We will find a way to do it if we are earning money in our business, for example, in our job. We find a way to do it. But the one area of our life that we very seldom find a way to do is those goals, those things that benefit only us. One of the worst situations for that is mothers. As wonderful as motherhood is, one of the things that mothers really at all ages, I don't care if they're grandmothers or great-grandmothers or what, is doing things that benefit only them. And one of the reasons for that is the feeling of jealousy. Not jealousy, there's another word, the feeling of selfishness. Somehow we can do something for somebody else. We can do something for our boss, our job, our business. We can do something for our kids, our neighbors, but somehow we don't quite feel comfortable doing something just for us. Now, one of the key issues of creation, of our ability to create, is the idea of loving ourselves, is the idea of self-image, is the idea of, do I think enough of myself to give myself whatever it is that I'm thinking about? Or will I think of it as being selfish? Because many of us are mothers and fathers with their particular understanding at the time when we as children said to them, we would like to have this, I'd like to have that, I'd like to have a new bicycle or whatever. They would say to us, no, we can't do that because of lack of funds, or you're not old enough, or you're too big for this, or maybe a dozen other excuses, gradually making us close down the idea that we deserve it. And then we gradually close down the idea of desire. Because desire, I want this. But we've told many, many times, that's selfish, or that's wrong, or that you're not old enough, or you're too old, or whatever it is. We've been told that very, very many times. So I want to make one major thing at this point. You need to write down your goals. You need to write down in clearest language as possible, as specific as possible, what it is that you would like to do. Let's say you would like to get rid of a habit that is becoming maybe an addiction. There's many of us out there today, and I work for a medical clinic group, and I have patients that are addicted to opioids, for example. One of the key issues is to decide that I no longer want to be addicted. That decision is a key point. You can say, well, it's very, very difficult. And it certainly is very difficult. I'm not playing it down, but when I am telling you that it is not only possible, but it's relatively easy compared to what information that you can get out there from your medical doctor or from people in your community. The main thing is that you have to intend to get rid of it. So how do you do that? You have to write down, for example, what are the disadvantages? What are the negatives on that particular problem that you're looking for? And as you list the negatives, you list the brain fog, you list the feeling like I don't want to get up and do anything, you list your creativity is at a minimum, you list all of the negatives about what it is that you want to change. If it were smoking, for example, the smell, the lack of taste, there's many, many things that you, as a smoker or an addicted to liquor or anything else, pot, whatever it is, what happens is you need to decide that there are some negative things, and you either are willing to live with those negative things, or you can do something about it. And now what you do is you put the opposite of each. For example, if you had the under smoking as a negative, the lack of tasting food, you would put on the positive side, I want to taste food. You would make a positive affirmation or a positive statement saying, I want to taste my food. That would have to be important for you to do it. Then on the negative side is the cost, for example, whether it's liquor, pot, or smoking. On the negative side is the cost. It's a huge cost. I have friends, unfortunately, who spend a lot of money on pot because it's legal in California, and wherever you are, maybe that's not legal. But we're talking about a lot more money than on cigarettes. For 40 years, I was a smoker of cigarettes, so I know. I can't imagine somebody smoking 2 packs a day today at $10 a pack or whatever it is. It's really ridiculous. So one of the things over there is money. So you put in the positive, no part of my budget, or however, my budget does not include smoking, does not include cigarettes, for example, or pot, or whatever it is. Making a positive affirmation somehow about each negative, making a positive affirmation that is the opposite of it. And then when you get both lists together, you look at it and you say, does that really make the idea of cost? Is cost important to me? I put it down, but is it important? And you may not think it's important. You may have put it down there 2 days ago, but you look at it again. Remember my car situation. You look at it again every day and you say, is that important? Is that really important? I'm going to go to the store and buy what it is that I'm going to buy, cigarettes, whatever, or a new prescription. But is it important to me? And so gradually what happens over a period of time, in my particular case, it happened probably over a period of 3 months during that time that I was working on what I wanted in a new car. So you have to think about that same thing. It's not going to happen overnight, because until the day that you look at the positives and decide, really, I'm ready to get off the chair, I'm ready to get off of just this exercise, I am now ready to make the change. I am now ready to make the change. I can stand up and pound the table and say, I am going to do this. At that particular point, and this is what I learned over my life and teaching 53 years at this point, teaching these kinds of principles. What I've learned is at that moment, the change is made. You can follow some other things, but that moment is exactly the same as actually moving and action. Rather than thinking about getting off the chair, I now am moving off the chair. And it's not automatic. It is on purpose. At that moment, we create the change. Now, I'm not saying that in the next moment, the change is there. It may take a little bit of while for that change to actually come into your life. Much the same as I told you about my stomach. It didn't happen like the next day, because things, molecules and the atoms and whatever is going on here takes some time. Unfortunately, it takes some time, and it can make, during that time, we can become, let's say, we can become jaded about it. We can say, well, I expected this to happen and it hasn't happened. But here's the good news. The good news is when you make that intention, it goes into the goal-seeking mechanism, and the goal-seeking mechanism is like a GPS on your car or on your phone. It tells you, it's leading. It doesn't tell you. It's kind of like on my phone when I use the GPS. What happens is, if I know where I'm going and I'm using it just to let me know how long it's going to take for me to get there, for example, I don't have the step-by-step directions on my GPS. It just tells me at the bottom when I'm going to arrive at that particular location. No voices are talking to me. And that's the same way in this. Once we put it into the goal-seeking mechanism, what happens is it's automatic. Now, you make that decision. You can also fairly quickly down the road undecide. Those of you that use your computer a lot, remember if you're typing on Microsoft Word or something and you hit the wrong key and what you're doing disappears from your screen, or the typing, the last paragraph disappears, whatever, you can go up on one corner and say undo the edit and undo the change. What happens is we can always undo our intention. So we have to keep our intention for a while. We have to remain, I hate to use a word, but we have to remain positive. We have to remain joyful about the experience that is about to happen. Because one of the key issues in placing what we want, the desire, and the intention finally into the goal-seeking mechanism to make it automatic, one of the key issues is how I feel about it. Remember a while ago I said, I have the feeling of intention. what happens is I have the feeling I want to jump up and down like a little kid who just unwrapped a new bicycle at 6 years old. Think about that for a second. The joy, we all have experienced that. We don't experience it as often as we should as adults, but we have experienced it a lot of times as a small child. When we get something that we really wanted, we have a joy. The other thing as adults that is a key description of the passion or the joy that is necessary to fire the intention as an adult would be the only other thing is orgasm. Think about that. Orgasm kind of is the ultimate joy. It might be very short, but it is the ultimate joy. Some of you may disagree with that, but from a psychology standpoint, that is true. So when you put something in the computer, I really want this. How much passion do you want it? How much are you really ready to accept the change? Because there's going to be change. Are you ready for it? What are you going to do with your life? And this leads me to, for example, a cancer patient. What I do with my life-threatening disease patients, this is really a key issue on goal setting. Generally, on my first visit, on my first appointment to a life-threatening disease, someone who's under the impression that they have a short time to live, my first question to them is, after I've introduced myself or have been introduced, is this question: do you want to live or do you want to die? Now many of you would think that's a pretty harsh question. And I agree, it is harsh. But the person normally would look at me like, are you crazy? What are you asking me this question like that? And I would have to ask it sometimes 2 or 3 times before the patient will answer me. And generally, 99 times out of 100, they would say, I want to live. Naturally, I want to live. I say, okay, why? What do you mean, why? Why do you want to live? Well, what do you mean, why? I said, well, let's say tomorrow you no longer have your life-threatening disease. You no longer have the cancerous tumors all over your body or whatever. What would you do? Well, what would make you excited? Well, I'd probably like to see my grandson graduate from university. Oh, really? How important is that for you? Well, I think it's important. Is it important enough to change what's going on inside your body? Well, what do you mean, important enough? Well, you said before you said your grandchild, you also said, I'd like to plant my garden next year with tomatoes and stuff and enjoy the harvest. Is that enough of a reason for living? Seriously think about what you would like to do or what you would do if tomorrow, if in the next second, you were 100% healthy. And I have to tell you, on the surface of this, if you were right now listening to me, that would seem, a pretty hard thing. But I have to tell you, it's not a hard question because it's a question that each of us should be asking every day when we get up. When we've been asleep for 8 hours and we get up in the morning, what do we have to live for? Now we have going on today a lot of problems with that question. What do we have to live for? We have young people who are depressed because nothing is being done about climate change. They're depressed because their desires have been suppressed by their parents or by the neighbors. You can't have this, or you don't have the money to do this, or you can't have it. They are depressed to the point where yesterday in the news, I heard that teen suicides are at the highest point in history. And it's not only teen suicides that is at the highest point of history, it's pretty much all ages. Now, of course, when we get up into somebody who has a life-threatening disease, and they are in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, it's pretty easy for them to say to themselves and outwardly to me, well, I've lived a good life, and all I'd like to do is to die without pain, or not having pain, I should say. And I would say to them today, technically, and with hospice, for example, you don't have to die. You don't have to go through the balance of your life in terrible pain, because we have medications that can take care of that. The problem is those medications make your life, your thinking very, very dull. And I have some patients and some students who would, if they have a choice, they want to die with a clear mind, because they have studied death, because they have studied metaphysics, because they believe in God, they believe in their particular religion, to the point where I know I'm going to die. We know that. Young kids, for example, don't think about that, but as we get older, we think about that. We think about we're going to die. So we have to come to grips with the idea of what is death. And there's a lot of information out there today, more than ever before, about death. Things that we can read, stories that we can read about angels being there to pick you up, your parents being there as you leave your body, things that are somewhat comforting. But the bottom line is we don't know what is going to happen until we do it. And so one of the things that many people want to do, including me, is I don't want to be drugged out of my mind in order to kill pain. What I'd like to be is to be absolutely clear as to what's happening as I leave my body upon death. Of course, those of you out there who don't believe that there's a life after death, then that's not a problem. I have friends like that, and I kind of feel sorry for them, because if you don't have a feeling that there's something after this life, again, that's a problem in terms of what are you going to do when you get up in the morning? What do you think about? What do you look forward to in the middle of the day when you were looking forward to the party that you're going to attend on the weekend with your friends or whatever? There has to be something worth living in order for you to live. Now, we can take the idea of many centuries of human beings before, which is we are independently little puppets with a supreme being controlling us with the strings up here, which is, of course, from my standpoint, not true. So we can take the standpoint where maybe whatever age we are, we ought to learn about how to make or create what it is that we want in our life. How we can, and it's not easy, and I have to tell you this, it's not easy. As a matter of fact, I can tell you one woman that I knew a few years ago. As a matter of fact, she had, when we were talking about this one day, she had a list of 83 qualities of the relationship. She had been divorced for a number of years, of the man that she wanted to have a relationship with. 83 different qualities. She had attended a web or seminar, actually, back in those days, and decided that she would take the time to write these down. Have you ever done that? Would you do that today? So if you were one of my patients and you were drug addicted, for example, opioid addicted, or alcohol addicted, doesn't make any difference, or pot addicted, you first have to decide you no longer want to do that. That's number one. And then there has to be a process there that you can learn to follow to bring about that final intention to make that final change. It's very important that you know that there's work involved. So sometimes a patient who's in, let's say, 2 or 3 months approximately away from leaving their body upon death really doesn't want to put that work in. I had only one, and I've had probably 300 or 400 cancer patients over the years, cancer students, if you will, really not my patients at that point. Only one said to me, "Ed, you mentioned that you can help me live or you can help me die." And I am asking you, now he was in bed with a major stroke, able to talk, but not able to move most parts of his body. And he was in his 80s. And he said to me, "I had my wife call you because I want you now to tell me what I can do to leave." And I have to tell you that I wasn't into doing that. As a matter of fact, his wife said to me on the way out the door, "Please don't talk to him about dying. Please don't tell him how to die." And I said, "Well, I can assure you I'm not going to do that because I don't know how to tell someone to die." Well, with the laws of California, I suppose, and Oregon and some other states, I can now say you can go to a physician and you can ask them for a prescription to essentially kill yourself. Euthanasia. That wasn't available back when this gentleman said to me, "Tell me now, Ed." So what happens is I no longer say I can help you live or I can help you die. What I say now is I can help you live. It's going to take work on your part. It's going to change your life. You need to change your life. You can't continue to do what you're doing. You need to make some major shifts and major changes. But I think I can help you do that through the goal setting and through creation and through helping a person develop the intention to do it. Now, one of the things that I teach, and this is something that I suggest you do if you're interested in what I'm talking about, is take a piece of paper or a couple of pieces of paper or a tablet and write down on one page goals that benefit only me. And on the next page, write down goals that benefit family and relationships. And on the third page, write down goals that benefit business, earning money, volunteering, or whatever. And then have the understanding for a balanced life. And after all, a happy life is always a balanced life. Maybe your definition of balance, but my definition of balance is everything is pretty well flowing. So if you have 1/3 of your creative energy creating goals for you, benefiting you, 1/3 benefiting your family and relationships, siblings and children and so forth, and 1/3 in your job, or if you're retired, working for the community, whatever, that 1/3 needs to be there. If you do it, you are operating a balanced life, and I can almost assure you, a happy life. And that is very, very important. Because as we close here, we're getting very close to the 1 hour. I want to offer you something there, because you can do the affirmations, and you can do, takes 21 days of repeating those to yourself. You can read about goal setting. But if you learn to quiet your mind into what I call a theta brainwave state, and you dream, if you will, you visualize the end result of the goal that you want. Kind of like having a daydream and really enjoying the dream. But if you visualize the change of what you are going to be after the change, and you feel the joy, again, pound the table type joy, all you have to do in that state is do it one time in order to put it into the computer. Now, to make a happy life, we need to have, from my perception at least, and from my teaching, we need to have probably 10 items in the category, each of those three categories. 10 goals to benefit us, 10 goals to benefit family and relationships, 10 goals to benefit our job, our volunteerism, whatever it is. And then as those goals come into existence and you cross them off because you now have them, you need to keep adding new goals. And this is what is so important. It's very difficult to get across to people, is that we are flowing. It's kind of like we are on a raft floating down a raging river. And there are rapids and there are calm spots, but we are in that flow. We are either in that flow and experiencing all of the ups and downs, or we're off in a cul-de-sac, off in the marshes, if you will, out of the flow. And that feeling is like constipation. That's the equivalent of the physical feeling of being constipated. So you need to get back into the river. As uncomfortable as it might be, as many challenges as it makes for you, you need to be in the flow. And I think, and I'm sort of a new ager in this respect, I think that we're living in a time where those who are in the marshes are going to stay in the marshes because they don't want to change. It's too hard to change. And I'm perfectly happy right here with the way things are, the mosquitoes and all, if you will. As compared to us who are, in my age, 87, in the middle of the river. I want to be in the middle of the river. I want to experience the rapids, and I want to experience, more so, I want to experience the still water, or the relatively still water, still moving. And the reason and the way that I can do that is what I teach, because I do teach how to quiet the mind into that very wonderful area of consciousness, how to do the visualization so that it becomes very, very real for you, and so that it goes into the computer and brings about the change. So I want to close this with the idea, with an offer, actually, not with an idea, but with the idea, or with the offer that I have, if you go to my website, what's called a breakthrough session. And a breakthrough session is a 2-hour one-on-one that we can do on the internet or using the same Zoom, whatever that you're watching today, or Skype, or wherever you are in the world. We can do a live 2 hours where I'm talking directly to you and I'm saying this is what's happening. And then we have a 40-minute quieting of the mind session. And then I leave with you an MP3 or a CD, if you're local, where you can practice that once a day through the next week. And then after 1 week of that practice, you can now make your own choice. Is this something that I would like to learn? And I'm saying to you, if you have any concerns about your health, you need to take my offer of my breakthrough session. You don't need to know anything about this. Now, keep in mind, if you've read the bottom of my invitation for this webinar, I've been teaching medical hypnosis, self-hypnosis, theta brainwave, and most importantly, in the last 10 or 12 years, a deep meditation called Yoga Nidra meditation. These are not mysterious things. You don't have to change your philosophy. You can be a Buddhist, you can be a Christian, you can be a Muslim, you could be whatever you want. What I teach is mechanical. What I teach is mechanical. And so if you'd like to have that experience, if you'd like to have that one-on-one with me, and we can discuss what your goals are at that time, because you're going to, if you do agree to take my full course, which is a 12-week program. It's not a course, it's a program, a training program, much the same as you're going to get new abs or new muscles, you go into a training program physically. Well, what I do is I have a mind training program. And at this point, over 60,000 students and some 100 plus patients from the local organization, medical organization that I work with, that have dealt with things like opioid addiction, teaching people to get rid of the pain, which is the reason why they have the opioid addiction. I teach to get rid of how to get rid of the pain. If you don't have pain, then you have only one issue, and that's the addiction. And while we make a big thing about it, if you get to the point where you no longer have pain and you're ready to get back in the world of living or back in the middle of the river, I can teach you how to do that. And you can do that without going to a rehab center. You can do that with this kind of help. It's amazing. It's learning the skills of self-help is what it comes down to. And I believe that I have been created, and I believe that you have been created perfect. Now, if you have a birth defect, obviously that doesn't fit. But most human beings on the face of this planet, were not born with a birth defect of one arm less or one finger less, or various things like that, or some of the diseases like cystic fibrosis that kind of come with genetics, if you will. But generally speaking, we have been created perfect. We have within us everything we need. We are not puppets. We are not operating at the end of strings. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't be thankful to our Creator, or we shouldn't have a philosophy involving a single source or multiple sources of gods, whatever you want. But what I teach, even the deep meditation, has no philosophy involved. It is mechanical. And it's wonderfully mechanical once you learn it in terms of your health, because it essentially gives you the keys to perfect health. And to the idea, for example, and I have this idea, I hope I'm going to be 88 in June, and I see myself as going to at least 100. I really haven't thought in terms of beyond 100, except in one area that I have decided that I really want, when it's time for me to leave, if there's a time for me to leave, I'm going to want to leave with a clear head. I want to leave from a body that is not writhing in pain. I want to leave joyously, if you will. That's what my desire is. And that is what my intention is. So I invite you, I'm going to send you an email where you can sign up for the 2-hour breakthrough. And the 2-hour breakthrough, last bit of information, is on my website, is offered at $250. For those of you tuned in today, I will offer that 2 hours to you for $97, which is a considerable discount. And also offer you some bonus things like a guarantee and some other things along with it. So I will send you that email. You don't have to answer it, but I would really encourage you to at least take a chance, spend $97 instead of $250, spend an hour, actually 2 hours with me, experience what I'm talking about, and then make your decision after that as to whether you want to continue this journey with me or you want to continue to do it on your own. Thank you so much for being with me today, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.